Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Today we are going to discuss about social interaction and social process. Its subject is school, community and teacher. It's lecture number 9. The outlines of today's lectures are: first of all we will discuss that what is meant by social interaction, and then what are the forms of social interaction, and then what is meant by social process. So what is meant by social interaction? A social interaction is an exchange between two or more individuals and is a building block of society. So social interaction can be studied between groups of 2, 3 or legal social groups. By interacting with one another, people design rules, institutions and systems within which they seek to live. And if we ask that why is social interaction is important? So social sport and social interactions have a positive influence on human beings' physical and mental health. It lowers occurrence of stress, depression, anxiety, and also highly affects our endocrine immune system. So at the end, we can say people need people. It is crucial to development. Without it, social animals experience distress and face severe developmental consequences. And humans, one of the most social species, social connection is essential to nearly every aspects of health and well-being. In social science, a social relation or social interaction is any relationship between two or more individuals. So social relations derived from the individual agency form the basis of social structure and basic object for analysis by social scientists. So we can define social interaction as this is a foundation of society. So without interaction there would be no group life. For instance, interaction is a major process for the socialization of an individual from birth to death, which exists in every culture. Now, what is definition of social interaction? Merrill, he defined that social interaction is the process of contact where the behavior modifies slightly. In other words, we can say that social interaction is the process by which we act and react to those around us. Social interactions include a large number of behaviors, so many that in sociology, interaction is usually divided into 5 categories. These are exchange, competition, cooperation, conflict, and cohesion. Social sport and social interactions have the positive influence of human being physical and mental health. Another definition of social interaction that is given by Dawson and Getty, that social interaction is a process whereby men interpenetrate the minds of each other. So from the definition we can explain that social interaction is basically that when we exchange our ideas with one another and we understand one another, like if I understand the ideas or the thinkings or the mood of other, what they want, so this is called social interactions. Now, what are the forms of social interaction? So there are different forms of social interactions. The first one is between individual and individual. and the second one is between individual and groups. The third one is between groups and groups, and the fourth one is between individual and culture. So these are the different forms of social interactions where the people interact with one another, like individual with individual, or individual with groups, or group and group, or individual and culture. So these are the basic forms of social interactions. First of all, between individual and individuals. So we can see that in any hospitals, when we face with the doctors, then at that situations we interact with individual to individual. Like in customer and shopkeeper, into a shop, the customer interact with the shopkeeper. That is also a way of individual and individual interaction. The situation for social interactions, persons to person. Like if a teacher teaches or a home tutor teaches to the students, then at that situations that becomes the social interactions, and that is called person to person. Then between individual and groups. Now, like a singer and audience, so many audience listens the songs of a singer. So that is the social interaction between individual and group. Then person to groups. So this is an example like in a classroom, a teacher interact with their students. So at one side there is one teacher, and on the other side there are many students. So this is the form of person to group interactions. Then between group and group, like in military, there are different companies, and in one company about 15 to 20 or more than 20 people forms a group or unit or company, and they interact with one another, means group to group. Or in a game, two different types of group interact with one another. Also, in any war, we observe that there also a war happens between two groups. Like if there is a war between India and Pakistan, so there are two groups. So this is one of the form of social interaction. Now individual and culture. There are two main types. Like there are some norms and there are some customs. When there are some norms, then there must be some values. And when there would be some customs, then there would be some traditions. Now here we define it gradually. And what is meant by norms? Something that is usual, typical, or standard. Value. Value means the principles or standards of behaviors, one's judgment of what is important in life. Custom. Widely accepted way of behaving or doing something that is specific to a particular society, place, or time, that is called custom. Tradition. An inherited, established, or customary pattern of thought, actions, or behavior, such as a religious practice or a social custom. So there are different forms or types of social interactions or social process. Like there are main two types, opposition and cooperation. In oppositions, there are two types, competition and conflict. And in cooperation, there are two types, accommodation and assimilation and acculturation. Now we shall define that what is opposition. So this is the disassociate form of social interaction. It includes competition and conflict. In other words, we can define or explain opposition, that is something that goes against or disagrees with something or someone else. Just about any political view has oppositions. Chances are you know the word opposite. This means something similar. The opposition to something goes in the opposite direction. Opposition is something that is goes against or disagree with the something or someone else. Suppose if you are holding a meeting, you could say, is there any opposition to this idea? And in war, the enemy is the opposition. And in the debate, the other speaker is the opposition. And if we see this term in politics, then the opposition comprises one or more political parties or other organized groups that are opposed, primarily ideologically, to the government. Party or group in political control of the city, region, state, country, or other political body. Opposition or disassociation. This is what that in every institution there is a competition, and competition may be called as struggle between two or more individuals. So who are striving to get something which is relatively limited. Now, what are the forms of competition? There are different forms. The first one is personal and impersonal competition. And the second one is formal and informal competition. And the third one is intra and intergroup competition. So first of all, we see that what is meant by personal and impersonal competition. Personal competitions takes place in a society when the individuals or group competing with one another, and the competition is face to face. For example, the election is the personal, in which the competitors know each other and the competition is face to face. The competition in which there may not be face to face interactions. For example, the competition for the post of Federal Public Service Commission is an example of impersonal competition. Another example, we can say that when a student wants to become a top position in the cohort board, etc., is called impersonal competition. So there are some types of competitions like personal competitions. Personal competitions involve direct face-to-face contact between opposing parties. And on the right hand side pictures you can see that here these are face-to-face competitions. So this is called personal competitions. Impersonal competitions is what that involves a struggle between persons or groups not directly aware of each other. Then formal and informal competitions. What is meant by formal or informal competition? So formal competition is that has structured rules and regulations. Whenever you would have some rules and regulations in some games, in our competitions, so that would become your formal competitions. So it has written rules to be followed, otherwise the violators will be punished. For example, in modern societies, like in cricket match or football match, and in many other games where there are some rules and proper trophy or proper competition held according to some principles, like once a year, 2 year, twice a year, and so on, by the government. So that becomes a formal competition. And informal competitions, that is what this is that competition in which there is no written rules and no regulations, but some unwritten set or rules are to be followed. For example, in primitive or folk societies, intro and intergroup competitions. What is it? The competitions that occurs within a community is called intra-group competitions. This is within the same community or village. Intra, this term also has been used for intranet. We use intranet, that services communication system that we use inside a particular organization or institutions. So in the same way, in any competitions, when the rules are inside one community, so that is called intra-group competition. And the competition that occurs between communities or groups, that is called inter-group competitions. For example, the competition between two teams of different districts or provinces or the countries is the inter-group competition. Now, what is the difference between competition and conflict? Competition. Competition is basically the continuous process and it is never ending. It is impersonal. It is unconscious and the individuals and groups are now aware of it. It encourages hard work. It is based on non-violence. On the other hand, conflict, it is not continuous process. At some stage it must come to an end. It is personal and it is conscious and the individual and groups are aware and know each other. It discourages hard work for law in conflict. Violent methods may be used in conflict. So now in general, if we discuss competition, so competition is a situation in which two or more people or groups are trying to get something which not everyone can have. So competition is an activity involving two or more firms, in which each firm tries to get people to buy its own goods in preference to the other firm's goods. So competition is a negative interaction that occurs among organisms whenever two or more organisms require the same limited resources. For example, animals require food such as other organisms and water, whereas plants require soil, nutrients, light and water. So if I ask question that is competition a good thing? So competition is essential because it leads to one very important thing, innovation. People are always looking for products with more features and capabilities, products that cost less but can do more, and products that just plain solve their needs or wants better than any other product can. So on the other hand, conflict. What is conflict? So conflict is a struggle or an opposition. If you and your best friend both fall in love with the same person, so you will have to find some way to resolve the conflict. So conflict comes from the Latin word for striking, but it isn't always violent. So conflict can arise from opposing ideas. So now, cooperation. What is cooperation? So no society can develop without cooperation. In Pakistani societies, we have a few examples in cooperation. For example, in the farms, the rural cooperate with their neighbors in watering the crops, harvesting the crops. In urban areas, the people cooperate with each other in different ways. Such cooperation is found between the customer and shopkeepers, teachers and students, and the owner and the laborers, and the doctor and the patient. So if we define the cooperation, so cooperation is people working together to achieve results or people helping each other out to achieve a common goal. An example of cooperation is when one person hands you a brick and you lay the bricks. An act or instance of working or acting together for a common purpose or benefit. Joint actions, more or less active assistance from a person, organization, etc. So we sought the cooperation of various civic leaders' willingness to cooperate to indicate cooperations. If we say that why is cooperation important? So cooperation is important because it allows people and group to work together to achieve a common goal or drive mutual benefits. Now there are some types of cooperations like informal cooperations. This is characterized as spontaneous and involves mutual give and then formal cooperation. This is characterized as a deliberate contractual nature and prescribes the reciprocal rights and obligations of members. Accommodations. The parents accommodate their children even at the cost of sacrificing their own desires. And Sabbath defines that accommodation as social adjustment, for example, adjustment of man to both natural and man-made environment. Assimilation. What is meant by assimilation? Ogburn and Nimkoff, they define that it means two dissimilar individuals or groups which become similar by removing their cultural differences. In other words, we can say the act or process of assimilating or of absorbing information, experiences, the need for quick assimilation of the facts, the process of adopting or adjusting to the culture of a group or nation, or the state of being so adopted. So, assimilation of immigrants into American life. And what are the examples of assimilations? An example of assimilation is the change of dress and behavior an immigrants may go through when living in a new country. This is assimilation. Then acculturation. What is acculturation? The definition of acculturation is the transfer of values and customs from one group to another. So Japanese people dressing in Western clothing as an example of acculturation. The first step toward assimilation is called acculturation. In other words, it is cultural modification. For example, permanent settlement of migrants people from India and Afghanistan and Pakistan. This is references. So thank you very much for being with me. Take care. Allah Hafiz.